Today, I'm going to be going over my guitar pedal setup. I'm using guitar pedals, but you could be using any type of outboard gear. The reason why I'm using guitar pedals is because guitar pedals fit really good on top of this desk. Not only that, but I mean, these have been so fun. You could put these in a box and they're small. Right now, I have them all out right now because, you know, this video is about guitar pedals and just showing you guys my process. But at the end of this video, you should understand, like, who is this for? Is this for you? Should you be investing in guitar pedals? Or should you just stick with plugins? Because there's awesome plugins in the computer. So who is this for? And also, I am using the MPC Live Mark II because it gives me up to 6 different outputs versus the MPC One is only 2 outputs. But you could plug in an interface and expand your outputs, but I don't have an interface to plug in here. So that's why we're sticking with the MPC Live. But before we jump into it, I do want to say thank you to today's sponsor, DistroKid. I'm sure we've all gone through this. We create a track, we master it, finish it up, and it just lives in our hard drives. Now, if you're signed up with DistroKid, DistroKid gives you and provides you so many tools for your music to be displayed and heard by all your followers. There's this really cool feature called Hyperfollow. This Hyperfollow feature is a link to one of your songs, whether it's a pre-release song or a song that you've already released. And on this page that it creates, it will have links to all your streaming platforms. Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes. Not only does it give links to where they can listen to your music, but it also allows you to customize it and share your Instagram, your YouTube channel, your TikTok page. And on top of all that, you could also add a music video. If you want to create a music video, if you want to create a welcome video so people can pre-save the song that you're going to release in a few weeks. Now, I myself have a lot of music that I've released through DistroKid, so I went back and I started creating some Hyperfollow links to some of my songs, and now I have a very good presentation of my music. Now, a side perk to Hyperfollow: if anybody clicks on Spotify link, it automatically has them follow you, so whenever you release anything new, they will be updated. Now, if you have a track coming out in a week from now, in a month from now, and you want to share that with your audience, you can go ahead and post that link on your bio and Instagram or any other social media platforms, and if anybody wants to pre-save that track, they will be notified. Once this single is released, they will get update via email, which is really cool because it has everybody engaging with your music. Now, Hyperfollow is very convenient, very easy to use. You do not have to go back up there and update the link once your song is released. It will automatically update all the links for you. Now, if you're not already using DistroKid, which is only $20 to upload unlimited tracks the whole entire year, go down and click the link on this video to receive 7% off your first year's membership. So a few weeks ago, I did a video with Ricky. If you guys have not watched it, I'll leave a link somewhere up here. You guys could go ahead and check it out. But we sat down, hung out, and just talked about MPC and guitar pedals. And after that video, just so many ideas came to mind on some of the advantages and disadvantages with working with different outboard gear in the MPC Live. Now, first thing to keep in mind, why do I have guitar pedals? Why am I invested in guitar pedals? Well, first of all, is because I do not use the computer. I do not mix in the DAW. I just finish everything right here. And with that being said, I don't have anything against DAWs or anything like that. I actually just upgraded to Ableton 11 yesterday, so I enjoy having that flexibility, but most of the times, most of my creative workflow stays right here on top of this desk, and I do my best to capture that moment. And when I capture that moment, I'm talking about I print my mix, I finish it, I finalize it, and I put it out and move to the next one. Now, a quick run through on how I have all this connected. It looks a little crazy right here, but it's not. It's pretty simple. I'm starting my idea within the MPC. I do my samples, arrangements, sequence. I finish everything right here when it comes down to production. And then I come out of the MPC outputs 1 and 2 into this platform compressor, add a bit of compression, come out of the compressor into this analog heat. This analog heat is like my mastering final touch before I print my beat. Now, remember that I said I'm using already outputs 1 and 2. That's the outputs we all use, 1 and 2. But guess what? We also have outputs 3 all the way to 6 available that most of us are not using. The way I'm coming back into the MPC, I'm going back into the inputs of my sample channels, which is sample input left and right. Now let's go ahead and show a little bit of how I will do it. There's actually a beat right here that I was working on. The beat is pretty much finished. This is where I start kind of diving into a little bit of mixing. And now I've mentioned this before. When it comes down to mixing, I do not try to overcomplicate things. I don't try to get too deep within mixing. I try to keep it simple. It's something that I'm having fun with, and that's what I'm gonna print out. Let's listen to the beat that I have right here. All right, so right here we have drum. Well, we have our sample. A big shout out to Sound Poetry. This is actually from one of his kits. This is Sound Poetry crates. So there's a lot of sample chops right there that I've been having a lot of fun with. And drums. These are drums from my volume sample pack volume 2. Also linked down in the description if you guys are interested. And then I have a bass line. That's it. You know, super simple. So it's just those 3 tracks. So in this case, let's say I want to go into my drums. I first listen to what it might need. Like in this beat right now, I was listening to it. I'm like, all right, that snare could use a little bit of reverb. You could use a plugin that you have within the MPC and add a little bit of reverb, or you could use a guitar pedal that has some awesome effects. In this case, I have this DDR and it has a drive, delay, and reverb. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna send out just the snare, go into this reverb, and then come back into the MPC. The way I'm going to do that is on my track where I have my drums, I have one shots, but in these one shots, I do not want to send the entire drum program. I only want to select the snare because that's the only instrument that I want to put reverb on. The way I'll do that is I'll go ahead and select the snare. Is this one right here is in pad 6. Once I select the snare, I go right here and I open up this little window and I go to the single pad, not where it has multiple pads. I go to the single pad, and right here in top, you'll have pad 6. That's what's selected. And then at the bottom, it has where it's coming out of, the outputs of that pad. It's coming out of program, the drum program. I don't want to come out of the drum program no more. Now I want to assign a physical output. I'm going to click on that and I'm going to assign that output to outputs 3. Outputs 3 is available in the back of the MPC. So now I connect the cable coming out of output 3 into this guitar pedal, coming out of this guitar pedal into inputs 1 on the back of the MPC. Once I have that routed, if I hit play, I'm not going to listen to the snare no more because the snare is here now. I have to engage this and turn this on. So the snare, obviously you don't hear it no more. Now, the way I'm gonna monitor that snare and I can listen to what I'm doing with these effects, I go into my sampler, and in my sampler, I just have to make sure I'm selecting the input that I have this cable going back into, which is inputs 1. That's where I have it plugged into. And then I'm gonna go from stereo into mono, because there's a mono signal. Once I have that, monitor must be on in, like I should be monitoring the signal. Now, if I hit play, I'll be able to listen to that snare, but that snare will be whatever is going on with this processor. We're obviously listening to that reverb, and let me tell you guys real quick, one big advantage of using hardware versus plugins is the fact that you could really push the signal, whether you're using a saturator, distortion pedal. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but there's a slight delay. I'm talking about a few milliseconds off. Like, it's a few milliseconds. So what I've been doing to get around this is that I go into my grid editor, I select that snare, and I go to don't snap and nudge, and I just nudge it over a few samples, just a few ticks. And now I'm gonna hit play and listen to what feels right to me. There you go. That was like three nudges over, and I feel like now is where it should be. And what I do, sorry, this decay is so long, but what I do from here is I'll play the beat, and while I'm playing the beat, I'm dialing in my mix. I'm dialing in how much reverb do I want to give, and this is how I mix my beats right now. Now, the fun part for me right now is the fact that I'm mixing, but I'm still in my production stage. I don't know if that makes sense, but usually when I export my stems, I go into the computer and I'm like, all right, I'm in the mixing type of mentality. I'm trying to think like a mixing engineer, and it gets too crazy for me. But right now, I'm still in the fun stage. I'm still having fun right here with the production setup, but I'm still adding a little bit of mixing to my workflow. You could bypass it. This is without it. With it. That's really cool. And as a matter of fact, this a snare roll, I actually want to send that snare roll as well to this reverb. The way I'm going to do that, the same thing. Just select that snare roll, go down where it says programs, and guess what? We're going to put it on outputs 3. So we go all the way down to outputs 3, and now we're listening to that going through this processor. Now I have my snare, or I'm sorry, my snare roll and my snare going into this reverb. So if I want to continue to use other pedals and I want to record that sound, as of right now, there's probably a better workflow for this, but for right now, the way I've been doing it is just, I'm going over to my audio tracks, and in my audio tracks, I'm going to go to my first available audio track. I'll name this track, hit do it. And on the inputs, I'm going to select inputs 1 because that's where that pedal is coming into, inputs 1. And now I'm going to go ahead and record this as an audio track. All right, so now we have that snare right here, which is now an audio track. I just got to remember to go back to your main MIDI page, and on the MIDI page, go to that snare, which is right here, and make sure we mute it so it doesn't trigger it 2 times. So now let's say I want to jump back to these drums, and now the entire drum program, not just the snare. Now we're going to select the entire drum program without the snare because we already muted the snare. So let's just say I want to send those drums now, like the kick, hi-hat, and roll into this JHS pedal. I'll go to the drum program. Now I'm not going to go to the single pad. Now I'm going to go to the entire program, and I'm going to go from outputs 1 and 2. And I'm going to select outputs. I'm coming out of output 6. So now there's a cable coming out of output 6, going into the JHS, coming out of this pedal, going back into inputs 2. Go back to my sampler, and right here, I'm going to go to input. Make sure I'm selected in input 2 because that's where I'm coming in from. It's also a mono signal. Hit play, and we should be hearing it. I'm actually going to solo the drums just so we can listen to just the drums. So now we're listening to the drums coming through this JHS pedal. So you could jump into your mix window. If you hit this mix window right here, you could go from your program mixer. If you hit it again, now you're in your actual single pad mixer. So now I'm able to mix the signal right here. I got my kick up here. Bring down the kick a little bit. Now, the cool thing about this JHS, this EQ right here is awesome because it almost reminds me of a Pultec EQ. Again, you can push this EQ and it does not break apart. I'm going to hit play. I'm going to hit the low end. I'm going to boost it up a few dB and just kind of go based off of the way it sounds. I'm going to go back down. One thing before I go into the next step, I will let you know, it's all about commitment. To me, is I commit to a sound, and I feel like that's been the best thing I can do for myself, just committing to it. And right now, I'm going to print this in an audio track, and the inputs of this is going to be track number 2. I'm going to hit record. When I hit record and it's an audio track, there's no going back. I actually like that. If there's a mistake, if there's a minor thing that I wish I can go back to, I just commit to it. Awesome. All right, cool. So now I go back to the MIDI page and I'm going to mute these drums. So now the whole entire drum is muted and now we're listening to the process signal. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bypass. I'm going to go how it sounds before the processing, and then we'll listen to how it sounds after I process with outboard gear. So let's listen to the signal before. Now that's a huge difference for me. I love the sound of this. Like, I love how my drums smack through this outboard gear versus before, if you guys heard the difference. This is not for everybody. Like I mentioned, some of you guys might be like, yo, that's too confusing, the whole routing and all that. That's fine. You guys could mix in a DAW. There's nothing wrong with that. There's so many more advantages mixing in a DAW. But for me, if I want to pick a plugin, it would be my outboard gear, my pedals, and just the plugins that the MPC gives me. I feel like that's more than enough for me to finish an entire track within the MPC. I don't want 1,000 plugins, 20 EQs and 20 compressors. Give me 2 to 3 EQs, compressors, and a delay and a reverb. I'm able to finish a track with that. So the advantages and disadvantages of this process. First of all, the advantage is the fact that it sounds awesome. It sounds amazing. Like I mentioned before, you're able to push the signal. You're able to distort your signal in a very pleasing way, and it just adds something extra to the sound that I'm producing. Another advantage to this is the fact that you have limitation. In the limitation you have, if you want to purchase a new, well, you're saying these are plugins, but if you want to purchase a new pedal, a new guitar pedal, which they're not that expensive. They're, yes, plugins are going to be a little cheaper, but it's not a night and day difference. But the sound is a night and day difference. I've ran into some very good guitar pedals. This DDR delay, this is an awesome effects pedal, but it's not the best. I wouldn't recommend it for everybody because the reverb on this, it sounds all right. It's decent, but I like the reverb that the MPC has. But this is optional. I would not recommend that. The JHS pedal, that's one pedal that I recommend 100%. It just sounds so good. This hot wax, we didn't touch with this hot wax, but this is one of my favorite distortion pedals. I'm not too knowledgeable in guitar pedals. I'm obviously not a guitarist, so some of you guys that know a lot about guitar pedals, let me know down in the description what you guys recommend for a multi-effect pedal. You guys help me out a lot. This compressor, the reason why I put the compressor before the analog heat is because when I compress my signal, some of my low end might suffer a bit if I'm depending on how hard I'm pushing that compressor. But the fun thing about this analog heat is that it has a EQ right here. So I can add a little bit of low end after the compressor and a little bit of high end after the compressor, which has been awesome. So that's been my workflow. This has been everything that I do right here is all the beats that you hear. They're not mixed in the DAW. They're just mixed with what you see right in front of you. So thank you for hanging out with me. I'm going to wrap up this video right here. If you guys are interested in any piece of gear right here, go down in the description. There's links right there. So if you guys have any questions, also let me know down in the comments. Thank you for taking the time and hanging out with me. I'll catch y'all on our next video. Peace.